The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is When Words Fail, Art Speaks.
Welcome to Created in the Image of God. This is the pre-recorded show for October 5th. I am in the studio with a woman who has spent 25 years in art therapy. Now, this is something that the past versions of me would have kind of said, oh, that's nice, pat on the head. Yeah, sure, let my kids go have some art therapy, right? But in light of who I've had on the show recently and also my conversations with this person, I'm really excited about today's show. And we're going to dig deep into why and how these various methods of reaching children and adults to process issues, past traumas, really is important and valuable. Welcome to the studio, Tracey, Saia.
Thank you, Wade. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's been a pleasure just getting to know you briefly and preparing for this show. And as I mentioned to you in our offline chat, this is a topic that's kind of welling up in me a little bit. You know, I have had my own share of trauma and I've suppressed it and dealt with it. And I consider myself to have sort of, overcome it, been successful, but I don't know that I've really processed it. And I'm thinking that there are pieces of me that are still disintegrated. So it's not about me though, but I'll be hopefully a good conversationalist to help unpack this for our audience. As we always do though, we like to learn about you through your origin story, your creation story here on Created in the Image of God. So let's dive into right away who the little girl Tracey was. And is Saia your maiden name or married name?
It's not. My maiden name is Polakowski. Okay. So I grew up in lower middle class in New Jersey. My dad was a blue collar working man. Mom stayed at home. We had a fairly typical life. I was pretty happy as a kid. Always a little on the quiet side and more introspective. I paid attention. I watched things that were going on in my world. So I think that sort of leads to, where things brought me as an adult and my career path.
Interesting. Siblings?
I have an older brother. Yep, he's 6 years older than me.
But was he a good older brother, caring for you, watching out for you, protecting his little sister?
As much as he possibly could with the age difference. I always felt, very, very secure. And he was very patient and tolerant. We do have a good, we're kind of, again, that introspective, quiet, but patient people. So I think that's a characteristic that kind of runs through my family.
And I'm getting kind of a meat and potatoes feel here. So was it the traditional roles as well? Dad, the breadwinner, mom, the care for the family, or were they both working?
No, that's correct. Yeah, my mom didn't work for most of my childhood. As she got older and she felt like, we were okay on our own, she would take like part-time jobs. And then once I went to college, she started to work full-time.
So then the natural question is, if you had that healthy, happy, normal childhood, what caused you and interested you in going into art therapy and dealing with trauma in others?
Well, I was always sort of interested, and again, because I'm that observer piece, right? So part of the story here is that my father has a sister that's 12 years older than him. So quite a difference. And she was raised with a much different experience than my father was raised. Just being over a decade apart. My grandfather at that point was an alcoholic. And my grandmother was trying to manage, right? So we have our own intergenerational trauma on my father's side. My aunt, she didn't fare so well. She wound up marrying a man that was terribly abusive, in multiple ways. And, they had their own children. So from afar, I watched this other piece of my lineage. I didn't really get to know them, and my parents, my gosh, they were married at 20, I think yeah. And, by 21, they took in my father's niece. And she was 16. And again, there was a whole host of traumas, and they tried, but they were young. And there was conversation around, how heartbreaking that was, and the dysfunction. And again, I always just kind of observe, like, wow, that stinks. Like, I hate that, those cousins that are just sort of, once removed from me, had a different life experience than I had. And it kind of prompted me, again, just to be introspective in that way. And, the art piece is that when I was going through my own stuff in high school, like every other kid, who am I, socially not super popular, I took to art as an expressive modality. It just helped me, just regulated me. I love the creative process. I love being able to make something. So once I got to college, I was a psychology major. It's more of a psychology undergrad major. And then it was once I got out of school that I really, went to work. But I needed to go back to school. But when you have a psychology undergraduate, you have to continue on with a master's. And I just thought art was like a beautiful marriage, really.
Wonderful. As you're talking, I'm thinking about this and realizing, okay, so I was the nephew or the niece in that. I was the one where some of my mother's brothers and sisters and my dad's brothers and sisters, they were normal, right? Whereas we were not. And I was the one with the shattered circumstances. And so I'm kind of viewing it through that lens and seeing you as, oh, you're the concerned cousin who wanted to go into this field because you were close enough to it and you had some ability to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you could relate to it through their experiences, and you wanted to help.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
That is fair. And I will tell you a very profound personal story for me. Once I got out of graduate school, I was looking for a place to land, and I thought it was one of the places willing that were hiring art therapists at the time to work in the community was domestic violence. And I thought, poof, there's some divine intervention right there, right? So this felt like, again, I was kind of fueled by domestic violence. There was also sexual assault on my father's sisters, what happened in their lineage. And I was very new to working in the shelter when I worked for the nonprofit agency in Monmouth County, in New Jersey. And I walked in to the shelter to work that day, and I saw my cousin. I saw my first cousin.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, we both kind of were, because we hadn't seen each other since we were kids, but we would see each other here and there. So, I got the whole story, and I just thought, wow, this has to be part of my purpose. This has to be something that, is meant to be, that I'm blessed enough to have, the family unit and to be able to help make change and help people. And I never left deviate. So I continued in that field for 2 decades, really until the pandemic changed things. And but I very much have a special place in my heart for
Wow,
that work.
that's quite a story and a coincidence. There are no coincidences, right? That's amazing. It's heartwarming. It's validating in terms of there's a higher purpose, there's a higher cause. This is created in the image of God. We set our path towards helping others in service. The sign of a true disciple of Jesus, whether anyone considers themselves Christian or not, doesn't matter, is to have love for other people, and to really want to help and make the world a better place. So thank you. And that's an amazing story. I want to go back and ask this question about generational trauma, because there are different views. And as I said, I'm learning more about this topic. What's your take on generational trauma? How does that work? Is it real? How does one deal with it?
It's very real. It's very real because there's an implied set of beliefs or ways of looking at things, right? That gets passed down. So if grandma and grandpa are traumatized, right? They're going to raise their children and lead their lives kind of through one lens. Now, we're making an assumption that they haven't particularly maybe dealt with everything. You know what I mean? A lot of times in the families that I saw, including, and I'll speak from my own experience, my father's sister's side of the family, if you start to introduce resiliency as a message, that can be different. But if you haven't gotten there, and resiliency and change, like the intergenerational trauma has to be broken by, some set of parents at that point, right?
Breaking the chain. The chain has to be broken.
Leading the message, teaching through, this is what happened to me, but this is not what has to happen to you, right? But a lot of times if we're not there, or think of how much we identification, it's our clan, our tribe, right? So loyalties, feeling as though, well, what happens if I'm the offspring and I do better than you? I'm quote unquote healthier than you, right? That's a real betrayal. So there are so many sort of psychological principles and concepts and things that you have to be aware of. You sometimes need permission to really is it okay if I'm better off than you were at this age? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like that.
So this is like kind of like behavioral DNA or psychological DNA. I'm thinking about a couple of animal examples. We've got cats. You saw my cat jumping up on my lap here before the show started. And what I know about cats is that the mom, and dogs as well, the mom has to teach them how to use the potty and where to use it. And if you have a dog yard, the mom teaches the dog to go at the out by the edge of the yard, not where they're playing. And if the mom doesn't teach the dog that, the dog will never learn it, right? It has to be taught at that young age. Similarly, the story about the elephant, you tie a baby elephant to a stake and it will learn it can't pull up that stake. When it's old, it could easily pull up that stake, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a learned behavior. And that big elephant is held trapped by this little stake that kept it captive when it was a baby.
It's a perfect metaphor. So that's so if you don't grow up with a sense of safety and feeling that the world is safe and it's okay to go out and explore and be your true potential, right? Then sometimes we parent through fear. And if how do you teach your kids to feel safe and that this world is safe if you don't actually embrace that for yourself? So they're right there in a nutshell is like part of intergenerational trauma.
Great. So I think that's a great place to go to our first commercial break, which is, if all goes well and the creek don't rise, a video about you and what you're doing now. When we come back, we're going to dive into that a little bit in the modern world. There seems to be an epidemic of mental illness right now among our young people, right? We're in a very challenged time with the advent of social media and a whole lot of other factors that didn't exist a couple of generations ago. I want to talk to Tracey a little bit about that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Tracey Saia on Created in the Image of God.
In a world where faith takes root and blossoms, comes a journey of growth like no other. Blooming for Christ, a captivating exploration of spirituality and the remarkable parallels between a plant's journey and our own. Just as a seed must germinate to become a thriving plant, our spiritual timeline begins with a single decision. Through the insightful words of Reverend Barbara Brian, this book takes you on a transformative quest. A journey of growth that echoes the stages of a plant's life. From the tender shoot of a young believer bravely facing the world, to the full bloom of faith experiences shared and cherished. As seeds of faith are sown, new believers are nurtured, and the cycle continues just as God intended. But the journey doesn't end there. As the plant matures, so does the believer, becoming God's chosen harvester in gardens of divine purpose. Reverend Brian's guidance, rooted in scripture and wisdom, gently leads you through the seasons of your spiritual life. Join us on this journey of discovery and renewal, a journey that unveils the beauty of your faith and the transformative power of God's love. Blooming for Christ. Embrace your season of growth and let your faith bloom. Available now.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God with Tracey Saia. We were talking about intergenerational trauma and the things that keep us captive. Let's now talk about the next generation, right? And what we see our children dealing with. Tracey, what's your take on that? Are you seeing a change? You work with children as well in schools with art therapy. What are you seeing about today's pre-adolescent and teenager?
Well, I think the obvious answer that you know too is that everybody's a lot more anxious. Children and teenagers in general are a lot more anxious. And there's more overwhelm. So in the last decade or so, there's become a rise in self-harm. Whether that just be, you know, like kids will call it like sort of scratching. It's more surface level. But this is something that there's absolutely been more of over the last decade or so. So I think those are two. Sometimes they go hand in hand. Sometimes not.
And I'm sure it's probably counterproductive to oversimplify and overgeneralize, but at risk of doing that, I want to throw out a couple of things. On the one hand, our children are exposed to a lot more information, right? Whether it's in videos or, news stories, right? On TikTok or whatever it is. They're way exposed at a much earlier age to everything that's out there and a lot of things that didn't used to be out there. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the inverse of that is that many of them are also sort of overprotected, right? The helicopter parenting. So the resilience that you spoke to earlier is lacking. And meanwhile, there's a constant being made aware of all the weirdness and the danger that comes with life. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think it's, yeah, exactly to your point. It's a twofold, right? There's like two very important steps involved here. Being overstimulated, being bombarded by content that you really can't make sense of, or again, we're taking a snapshot of something and blowing out of proportion. Definitions are different, so there's all that constant stimulation, that adults are allow themselves to be bombarded by as well, right? But If you're young and impressionable, you're not sure what you think yet. So you are still forming ideas and opinions, as opposed to us. We probably feel like, we're a little bit more settled in that route, right?
Well, and I have two kids in high school. My daughter's a senior. My son is a freshman. And you know what I hear from my daughter constantly? Dad, you don't understand high school today.
Mm,
And I probably don't. It's
yeah.
it's very different, right? So they feel like, parents can't maybe help them make sense of it either.
Yeah, I mean, this is big stuff. Like, the generational gap now is huge. This is the biggest generational gap we've ever experienced. You probably understood your grandparents way more than, yeah, your kids understand you, or vice versa, right? This technology, their language, it's like grown exponentially.
So what can parents what can a parent do with this dual, they're overexposed? I mean, obviously we work with limitations of screen time and try to, of course, we're past that now with our senior, where we're beginning to, have to let go more with our freshmen. And I don't know if we ever sort of really overprotected them. We had this philosophy of exposing our children to hardship, even trying to work hard to accustom them to it, right? We moved out on the land. We've got chickens, we make them go out there and clean out the chicken poop from the chicken coop and stuff like that, right? But it's hard to build that resilience in maybe an urban environment where you want your home to be a safe space and you want to provide for them. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think no matter where you live, but that does help, right? So the idea of, like, just doing work, being responsible for things, right? Having responsibilities is great in general. But also allowing for the idea of failure, like this generation of parenting was so scared to let their kids fail.
Yeah.
And what we found,
you got to get a 4.0 to get into college, right? You can't have a B+ in school.
Yeah. And by the way, I remember, my daughter was a pretty good little soccer player back when she was in grade school. And by the time she got to middle school, I remember specifically being told she was too late. I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. I was like, she's 12, like, like she's too late to, like, play soccer. Like, you know what I mean? So their society, right? That's coming from.
Well,
That's
that's a big issue, and it's probably above your pay grade. But is society really off on many wrong tracks? And what can we do about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I knew that, but there is sort of a collective piece to that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Where, one thing begets another. So what is it? Is it chicken or egg? Did it start with us being anxious, or was it because you're not a good enough soccer player? I need to start you at 4. Like, I mean, so there are some questions in there about, what started what. I mean, we know I think there was that book that came out when my kids were little, like, with the Tiger Mom. Was that, I don't know if you recall that, or, this whole philosophy of, they need to be over scheduled. We need to, what's going to go on their college resume? I mean, that's our anxiety, right? That wasn't the kids' anxiety. That was coming from the parents.
Yeah. Well, so let's take it down to the individual level, maybe talk about a story or two of what you've been able to do to help. Are there, obviously changing any names to protect the innocent and maintain your professional integrity to not talk about people, but what stories can you share that give us a specific insight into how to approach a given situation and how maybe you helped somebody realize something and make a change?
Well, I can give you an example where I feel like this incorporates the idea of the parent as much as the kid. So this was a few years ago, and I was seeing a teenage girl who was really struggling within her family. The older sister started to have just a whole host of emotional and psychological problems. And she was in treatment centers quite often. And the focus became on that older child. And my client, and there was a younger sibling, sort of really, there wasn't as much time and attention for them. And all of the energy and focus, and my client in her youth had a really great relationship with this older sibling. And it just really started to crumble. And, nobody really, there's no preparation for this. And it's happening in real time. And you don't know what to do about it. And everybody's just doing the best that they can. But my client became very withdrawn and resentful. And there was a very strong push from the parents for just reconciliation, forgiveness. Let's go back to the way it was. You having your own feelings about this is really only making the matter worse. You know what I mean? That kind of a sentiment. And here's how the art therapy, right? So this is something that now becomes an internal battle, right? I mean, there's love there. She loved her sister. That wasn't in question. But this idea of like, this relationship is toxic and I get hurt by it. And I also want to protect myself, right? And, parents are going, you gotta, right? So she was very verbal, and there's a lot of verbal therapy in art therapy, just so we're aware, but what happens is, so then we people will inevitably get stuck. They're like, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. I hear that quite often. And we moved over to the art. And I asked her a prompt about her sister. I can't remember exactly what it was. And she drew a door and she drew some lovely flowers. And we just kind of, what you do is you just talk about the image. That's it. What did you put down on paper? There's no kind of magic here. It's their projection. So it's your words. What do you think it is? And she began to talk how, this again, the internalized battle. Yeah, it would be great to have this, but what a blah, 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 blah. After like some time, I was like, well, if you were gonna, go through that door, how would you do it? And now we're talking about the art. And she didn't draw a doorknob. You know what a door looks like, right? I mean, we all know the components of a typical door if I'm going to ask you to draw it. So there's where like sort of subconscious material comes in. And it was just like, she wasn't going through that door. Like it just wasn't going to happen. She wasn't ready, maybe, years later, I hope, now maybe she's ready. But, that was like kind of blew her mind a little bit, and the idea of like, she really had to just sit and go, I'm just not ready. I can't open this door right now. I don't have the skills. I don't have the resources. I have to know myself better. You know what I mean? There was more to do before she could really open that door. And honestly, then trying to explain that, like the proof is in the pudding, the visual piece, having mom and dad, like at a later point with the child's permission, bear witness to that is like, listen, guys, this is nobody's fault. This is just where we're at, so can you honor her time frame? Can you back off a little bit and honor her time frame?
Yeah, what comes to mind as I'm listening to this, and hopefully everyone in the audience is processing what you're saying in their own way and digging deep into what it means. What I'm getting out of this is that in a transactional world, in a functional world, in a modern, industrial world, everything's a transaction, everything's a number around success and moving forward, accomplishing something, right? Whether it be materialistic or even spiritually. But what really matters is the person at the center of it, right? The fact that she was not ready to walk through that door, people around her might have been wanting to try to push her through that door, you know what I mean? And insisting that, get over it and you need to get through that door now, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
but the person at the center of it, to really value the human being and to understand enough about how complex we all are, how individual autonomy, and we get to decide what's right for us and what's necessary for us.
Mhm.
Um, and to be in an environment that's nurturing so that we can move forward, whatever that means for us, or if it means making peace with our situation, because that's what we need to do. Nobody else kind of gets to tell you the thing you need to do. And this is where, the kind of stereotype of somebody sitting on the couch and somebody getting paid to listen to them
Mhm.
kind of loses its value if you don't understand that the person at the center is the most important thing. That human being, that soul, and their own journey that they're the captain of, and
Right.
nobody else. And we're there to possibly help somebody on their journey, but it's their journey.
Most definitely. I'm so happy that you said that, because one of the thing that really makes me thankful and grateful for is that somebody allowed me to bear witness. Like there is no greater human connection moment for me than when somebody's allowing themselves to be vulnerable or talk through, and they let me experience it. When I was like a young therapist, I was just like, ugh, how am I gonna fix this person? How am I gonna help them? They're all worried about what they're gonna say next. That happens to every kind of young therapist and students that I talk to. And now it's like you just feel the energy. You bear witness to their experience, and then kind of it guides itself. But there's a lot of trust in that process. And this is me saying that after, again, 20
25 years of experience.
Yeah.
So, do you struggle at all? We talked earlier about, the societal problem above our pay grade to fix. Do you struggle at all with perhaps your job being viewed as you're getting paid to fix things and fix people? Or is that not part of what you have to deal with?
I mean, I struggle. I struggle with that now. I've always struggled with it. I mean, I was in nonprofit. I spent 20 years in nonprofit. I mean, if I wasn't married and, supported by my spouse, I would have lived at poverty level. In New Jersey, what I would have made would have been like poverty level. And here I have a master's degree, right? So this idea of value around helping people it has been very difficult for me to reconcile over the years.
This is a societal issue, right? Teachers don't get paid what they should be, and the whole way that the institution is built. I taught 4th and 5th grade for a couple of years out in California, and I got out of it because I realized the whole structure, the incentive structure, everything about it was not conducive for me to have the life I needed to have within that system. As much as I really wanted, I loved teaching those 4th and 5th graders at that emerging point. What I loved about that moment was being the one that helped them grow from complete and total dependence to the beginning stages of independence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking charge of getting your own homework done and turning it in, helping you to begin to say, you're going to have to come up with your own solutions to this, teaching them to help even manage the classroom, get jobs in the classroom and help. Anyway, I loved working with the kids, but the whole system, it's like, I can't make this work.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's really sad.
Anyway, so we're going to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about where are you growing next. I'm also going to bring in a recent show that my wife and I watched and get your opinion on it from the art therapy perspective. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Tracey, Saia, and art therapy on Created in the Image of God.
Welcome to the Royal Falcon Foundation. Our curriculum and activities inspire and train adolescents through hands-on experiences, fostering growth and empowerment. Through immersive and challenging experiences, we shape young minds to think independently and develop their leadership skills. Our programs foster new friendships and unity, shaping young leaders to tackle real-world challenges with confidence. We believe in equipping the next generation with the skills to become leaders of tomorrow. Join us at the Royal Falcon Foundation and be part of a journey that empowers, unites, and inspires. Double your impact with our matching grant. Until the end of 2025, every tax-deductible donation to the Royal Falcon Foundation, up to $1,000, will be matched dollar for dollar. Visit our website to donate now or email info@royalfalconfoundation.org for more details. Together, we can make a greater difference.
Welcome back, everyone. Right before the break, we were talking about the specific examples of helping other human beings and also some of the structural issues that exist in our society around doing that, right? And I just want to say how honored I am, Tracey, to have you on the show and to be able to talk to somebody who's dedicated her life, as you mentioned, not necessarily for monetary or material gain, but for the satisfaction of being able to participate as a witness in those intimate moments where people realize things about themselves and make decisions about their own journey in life, and to be a part of that and helping others. Just you've found that for yourself, and it's just wonderful to be talking to you. We recently watched this show. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it was Netflix, called Boy Swallows Universe. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm, I haven't.
Well, it's an Australian show. I think it has 2 seasons. And it's this sort of chaotic family situation. The mom has been a drug addict. She's not currently one, but she's living with or married to somebody who's was a drug dealer and wasn't, but now he is again. And the two brothers growing up in this, one of whom can't talk because of a traumatic incident that we don't know about. But he writes in the air, but he also draws pictures, right? So that's where this idea of art there, and it's a really compelling show. You haven't seen it, but I found it interesting talking to you and seeing how they had built in, the communication of the children through art. And we've seen this in many movies. So just spend a moment as we talk about where you're growing next on that image of the door without the doorknob, right? How, not necessarily that image, but how art in particular is central to this work.
Well, so before we ever had language, we took in our world visually, right? So this is part of where this theory comes in, right? Is that, we talk about now visual learning all the time, right? Are we an auditory learner? Are we a visual learner? We know that most people are visual learners, right? So we like to see things, and the art is a reflective piece. So it's really communication with yourself. Again, when she drew the door, that wasn't for me. I got to bear witness. I got to be part of that. But she was like speaking back to herself. And sometimes it's really hard to speak back to yourself. You and I talked a little bit about this before we started, the idea of I just lost my train of thought. But the idea of like, this is like a mano a mano process in that case. And when there's trauma, it's not stored in the prefrontal cortex where logic, that's where I was going, logic, the logical brain wants to tell you, what the deal is, right? But it's the feeling that steers the ship. So if we don't honor that feeling and we don't acknowledge that feeling, like you just wind up being ruled by it anyway, right? So it makes sense to understand what it's trying to say, like honor it. It's really about honoring your emotions, in my opinion, and let people honoring them, not being afraid of them, but getting to understand them. And then the logical brain can kind of kick in and go, okay, do I have to be that scared today? Do I need this anxiety this much? But it's only sort of after you begin to understand how important the emotion is, then you can ask the logical brain to, be part of it.
Yeah, and it's very interesting and kind of fascinating that you're talking about the brain now and how we initially learn through visual learning. I like to read Scientific American. I've subscribed to it for decades. A couple of articles I read recently was one was they were talking actually about Elon Musk and how he wants to, create some tool that wires directly into the brain, because for him, even voice recognition, he says, is too slow for him to get his ideas out. And they were kind of making fun of him and saying, the truth is, scientific inquiry has shown that the actual executive sort of thought creation is way, way slower than certainly Elon Musk imagines, or that we even imagine. That we take in massive, massive amounts of information. When you think about, in computer terms, the number of bits and bytes and whatnot of every second of our visual, but the stuff that we're actually focusing on versus what's in our peripheral vision, and the stuff that we're then processing enough to sort of get a thought out, there's a huge, huge disparity between those things. And we don't really, they're just learning how the mind really works. And then you start talking about the emotions and how they fit into all that. It's a vast, uncharted mystery space, right? The other thing that I read about was they're now uncovering those aha moments where we take all that ambient information and all the, collective thought or wisdom, and then we look at something and suddenly we see it differently. And whether it's in the shower or walking out under the stars at night, and they gave a couple of examples of that epiphany moment of realization, how that happens, right? And I just imagine that sort of this art therapy, it's getting at something very deep and very profound in all that mystery, right? So in that context, where are you growing next, right? Where do you go next? And I have to say, 25 years of experience, you must have started this at age 15. You have a lot of life ahead of you yet. Where are you growing next with all this?
Well, just to go back, so I again love that you said that, and with the art, those aha moments, right? So you're growing new neural pathways, you're making like new connections, which then sort of secure and allow you to kind of keep growing in that direction. So, I love the idea of I am also, it's hard to say, like I love the science. I love the spirituality piece. Like I've just began really sort of meditating on a daily basis. I am just really focused on honoring my values, like leading with compassion, leading with empathy. I find as I get older, I'm trying to help continuing to find my own stillness, and like also helping to bring that in, because this dysregulation, like everything we talked about, the being bombarded, having to make 30,000 decisions a day, right? When we're overcome with stimuli and then things going on in the world and opinions, and that is just so much. I feel like it's just so much. And I'm trying as I get older, and what I also want people to understand when they come into my office is like, this is it. What you and I have right now in this moment is really what matters. Like the connection that we have, right? When I'm with somebody, like honoring what they say, and then really finding like the stillness in that, and like letting that be the thing that's really most important.
What comes to mind now is a song by Victoria Williams. Probably nobody's heard of her. She's rather obscure, but the line is, the joy in the merry-go-round is the merry. You talk about 50,000 decisions a day, right? And the merry-go-round we're all on, the hamster wheel that we're all on, right? The joy in the merry-go-round is the merry, right? To try to get joy out of all this and meaning out of it versus just being on that treadmill. And that comes from other people, the ancient Sanskrit word namaste, right? The spirit in me, the light in me salutes the light in you, the divine in you. And right in there in that Sanskrit word is the word name, nam, N-A-M-E, namaste. We all have a specific point and purpose in being here. You and I may not know what each of ours is at some divine level. We're here for a reason. But we're here together and we're discovering that in those moments that you talk about, those moments of connectivity. And the fact that you've dedicated your life to helping people with art, therapy. I mean, it's just awesome. So, we're running out of time here. We've got to kind of land this plane. What thoughts would you leave the audience with today as a result of, your experiences and what you want to share and what you want to accomplish?
Well, honestly, I invite everybody to just sort of slow down and to really just sort of, embrace the moments. This idea of being grateful is really, it's not hokey. It's very grounding and centering. And I think if we can just sort of learn to have more of those moments, and to bear witness to each other, you invite, all of a sudden, like, you just kind of take it down a notch, and you invite kindness and you invite compassion. And it's not like that hard.
Yeah. And if more of us do it, it becomes a virtuous celebration, and it grows, it increases.
Yeah.
It's like, there's the analogy of, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like leaven, right? And the active agent of yeast, which infects other things positively rather than negatively, and spreads that, each one becoming a change agent. Well, thank you so much, Tracey. It's just been wonderful getting to know you a little bit better, hearing your perspective and sharing it out with the audience. And for everyone else, stay tuned. The last thing we have to do today is to share the sneak peek of what's coming on in next week's show. Tracey, I hope we can stay in touch. I'll be writing an article about this. Everyone's going to want to check that out with my musings as I reflect on it and go through the transcript. And Tracey, is there a website or something, a program or anything that you want people to get in touch with or stay connected with you?
Well, they can find me through my website if they are interested. It's Tracey E. Saia, so it's my name with an E in the middle for Elise, .com. And that kind of explains a little bit more about me. There are things on my website. I'm actually starting a course that talks about core principles. It talks about beliefs, and I designed this because it's really hard to get people to commit to therapy. That process of like long-term opening up, being vulnerable. Like, I think because of the dysregulation that we feel, people are having a hard time sort of tolerating that, like, oh, I got to be in therapy. So I, again, because my goal is to always like really reach people and help people, I put together a 10-week course. So that if anybody were to be interested, that is on my website. And you can message me through that. And we can just have a conversation through that at all. I'm always open to just having conversations, or, if somebody needs a referral, or this is what I'm struggling with and how to help somebody else find what they're looking for. I'm not the right fit for everybody, but I will absolutely help people find what they're looking for if I can.
Awesome. So Tracey, TraceyeSaia, TraceyeSaia.com.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracey. Remember, everyone, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. We'll go to the sneak peek now, and we'll see you all here Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Central and Sunday at 7 a.m. Central. Bye now. Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson. I'm back in the studio to record the sneak peek for this Sunday morning's 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern Time Created in the Image of God show with a returning guest who's focused on what the Baha'i writings say about independent investigation of truth and how we should approach the media. And Meritash Olson is his name, and he's given lectures now and presentations within the Baha'i community to groups of scholars for Baha'i studies and so on. So welcome back to the studio, Meritash.
Hi, Wade. Thanks for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you. Boy, have things changed in the media landscape in the last couple of months since we talked to you. Your work seems more relevant than ever. Are you getting that sense yourself of how important it is, what you've been focusing on and what you're unpacking here?
I would agree with that. I feel like it's so important for people to understand that there are all sorts of filters applied to the information that we receive, and that it's very important for us to seek out independent sources of information that can give us a more accurate picture of facts as they play out across the world, and to understand that there are powerful vested interests that put information in front of us. They're willing to bear the cost of that because they understand that they are creating a certain vision of the world, a certain interpretation of current events that benefits them. And we should understand that sometimes there's quite a gap between that and reality.
Well, in the Baha'i faith, for those who don't know, in this sneak peek, as we send it out to make people aware of this show and get them to tune in, is the most recent, you might say, Abrahamic religion, right? Tracing its roots back to Abraham, just like the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims. But with the additional recognition of not only are we one family in Abraham, that prophet founder who was told by God, I will make you the father of many nations. And implicit in that was also many religions. But what's unique is that the Baha'is also have a theology that allows them to embrace Hinduism and Buddhism and recognize that all these messengers are from God, and that this is just the latest in a long line of messengers bringing an update, a reboot, a new software upgrade to the theological and the spiritual understanding of our species, the medicine for this day. And in that context, this second hidden word of Baha'u'llah that says, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice, and focus on it so that I may confide in you, so that through its aid you shall see with thine own eyes and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. To me, I don't know if you see that as really a focal point of your work, but the independent investigation of reality, training us to have the ability to sort through the biases and, the noise and the appeal of whatever it is they're trying to sell us, so that we cannot be bought and sold by media or the opinions or the ideologies of others, but that we can become independent citizens with the ability to discern good and evil, as Paul said, having exercised our senses to discern good and evil for ourselves with the aid of the Holy Spirit. Do you see your work in that light? And what are some elements of your work that people can learn when they tune in this coming Sunday morning?
That's right. Abdu'l-Baha talks about how important it is for us to comprehend with our own mind, that we're all given this individual endowment and capacity so that we may pursue reality and not to rely on hearsay or the opinions or the perspective of others. And so that's exactly what I'm trying to do with regard to sources of information. A lot of people turn to platforms like, say, Google, and it's got a lot of subsidiary elements there. You have Google Maps and YouTube and its search function, Google Search, and so many different things wrapped up under that umbrella. And we've come to kind of accept that in our lives. And sometimes we can turn to those search results and think we're getting just unvarnished fact. And it's important to know that other people have looked into it. And I'll just read you a quotation from Nafiz Ahmed, who is an investigative journalist, who says the following: "The United States intelligence community funded, nurtured, and incubated Google as part of a drive to dominate the world through control of information. Seed funded by the National Security Agency and CIA, Google was merely the first among a plethora of private sector startups co-opted by US intelligence to retain information superiority." We can go into it further, but that's a perspective that the average American internet user wouldn't really have, just thinking about getting search results from the Google search engine. But if you look into the investigations of Dr. Robert Epstein, you'll see that there is lots of behind the scenes curation that goes on with algorithms and and with censorship and with providing you information that vested interests want you to see, and hiding other things that they don't want you to see. It's important to understand that all around us, so many of our experiences with popular media are curated in that fashion.
Well, thank you, Maritosh. We're going to end this sneak peek there, although I've just decided we're going to actually use the sneak peek as the first segment of the show. So for those of you tuning into the sneak peek, be here next Sunday. For those of you who are seeing this sneak peek as the first segment of our Sunday morning show, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Created in the image of God every Sunday morning, 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern, every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. See you there.